Hi, and welcome back to another video. This is going to be a little bit different today. This is going to be this is going to be exactly just a sit-down chat fertility story. And if you're new here, which most people probably are because this is a very new channel, my name is Nicole and I'm currently 8 months pregnant after about a year and a half of infertility. And when I say infertility, obviously I'm going to get into all this, but I don't just mean like we tried with no intervention, like we tried everything and things weren't working for us. I'm in the middle of editing this, so I just wanted to clarify a few points or just kind of summarize a few things. I had 100 doctor's appointments in the span of a year and a half, and I'm going to put the breakdown of everything in the description. When somebody says they're going through IVF or they're going through fertility, you don't really know what that entails. I had no idea until I was like knee deep in it. So yeah, check the description for the breakdown of what I actually mean by all of this. Yeah, 100 visits in a year and a half was wild, but now you'll hear the rest of the story. Again, because this video is very different than the vlogs I've been doing, please make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy this, and also comment and let me know any other type of sit-down chat you want me to do. I've said this in like every video and I promise I'm going to do it. I plan on doing just like an overall Q&A, like a get to know me. I can do a pregnancy overview. I plan on doing some like baby hauls, pregnancy hauls, things like that later down the line. But without further ado, let's get into my fertility story. I have a note on my phone that literally documents my entire journey, so I'm just using it for reference because, like I said, it's a long journey. So I guess a good place to start would be at the beginning. I work with kids. I'm very much a kid person. I wanted kids early and I knew that. And Matt and I started talking about it probably like early 2022. And we kind of thought in our heads, okay, let's start trying like April. So we start trying in April 2022, and at the time, I didn't really notice anything. As people do when they start trying to conceive seriously, like we weren't really in the if it happens, it happens boat. We were like, we want this. So obviously I started taking ovulation tests. We tried naturally for about 3 months. In those 3 months, I got one positive ovulation test, which is obviously not the norm. You're supposed to ovulate every month. My cycles, I guess I should start a little farther back. I had been on birth control for about 6 years. And I was on the lowest dose you could be on. And I went off of it several months before we started trying because I was just like, I want to give my body as much time as you need. I do know now from some of the fertility stuff I did, that doesn't matter. But anyway, once I got off birth control, my cycles were increasingly longer. With birth control, they were at 28 days. Then it was like 30 days. Then it was 35. The longest cycle I got to was 52 days. So right there, I was like, okay, you know what? if I'm not ovulating according to these ovulation tests, and my cycles are 52 days long, there's something that's off. Let's just get it checked out. Tried to go to my regular OB, and literally right off the bat, she was like, you should just go see a reproductive endocrinologist. The biggest blessing in this entire thing, I don't really use the word blessing lightly, but was the fact that the healthcare system that I was with, like the doctor's offices, did not have an opening until the following November. So this was June by the time I went to the doctor, to the regular OB. She gave me 2 names. One was within the same practice, which I called to make an appointment, and they said, okay, how's November 3rd? I literally had to say, wait, I'm sorry, did you say November? The other one was a clinic called Kind Body, which they had an appointment like 2 weeks later. That was the biggest blessing of this entire thing. I could do an entire video just talking about Kind Body, and as I've mentioned, I actually run their TikTok now. Like, it is just, if you're curious about fertility, if you're having fertility issues, literally anything, Kind Body. Highly recommend. Do not have enough good things to say about it. That brings us to July, or mid-July 2022. Age, for sure, is one of the biggest predictors of fertility.
1 moment, please. Please repeat.
Anyway, age is one of the biggest predictors of fertility, right? I'm 26. Barely 26. Other facts about me: I don't drink. I am extremely healthy, if I do say so myself. Like, I live a very active lifestyle. I eat minimal refined sugars. I don't eat a lot of processed food. I'm vegan, so I'm not eating red meat and dairy. Like, anything you can think, like, if you have a checklist of someone who's like, this is what I picture as somebody healthy. All the things. Like, literally all the things. So, on paper, I should be getting pregnant so easily, right? Clearly not. So we go in and I meet with my doctor for the first time, who, amazing. She basically says, given all of my health factors, she basically says, yeah, you're not ovulating. And to this day, I cannot remember why. Like, she gave me a couple reasons it could be. She was like, it could be this, could be this, could be this. To this day, this is the one part of my entire fertility journey that I don't remember. But anyway, so she says, yeah, so it looks like you're not ovulating, or we don't know when you're ovulating. You're not ovulating regularly. I think all we need to do is something called timed intercourse. It's exactly what it sounds like. They give you, at least for my case, I took an oral pill for like 5 days. That made my follicles grow. I went in like a week later. They did an internal ultrasound to look at my ovaries, see if I had any follicles growing, and they say, once you get to that point, they say, yes, you have follicles, or we wanted one. Yes, you have a follicle. We'll tell you when to trigger. They give you a trigger shot. You do the trigger shot. Basically, they say, have intercourse in this window, right? So we do that, and when I say everybody on the team, I mean everybody. Like, it seemed at the beginning like such an open and shut thing. Like, you're not ovulating, let's get you to ovulate. That'll solve it. So we do that, and I stand by this. That first pregnancy test that I got, and I did not test early for this. The first blood pregnancy test results I got was one of the hardest. There's two that are the hardest. I'm going to say that was the hardest, because to me, that was just, even though it was so early on, it was kind of this like shock of like, oh wait, this isn't as easy as we thought. And I actually started bleeding the night before my pregnancy blood test. But I had heard about implantation bleeding and whatever. So I was like, maybe it's that. But I remember crying the night before the blood test. Like, I'm so scared. I don't think I'm pregnant. I'm bleeding. I was not pregnant. And that was a period. So we kind of reevaluate. Okay, where can we go from here? And I'm ready to step it up a little bit. I go, can we do IUI? Absolutely, we can do IUI. If you don't know what IUI is, the best way that I always explain it to people, the cleanest way, is if you've ever seen Jane the Virgin, the show, it's what happened to Jane. Basically, everything's the same as timed intercourse in the sense of they give you a medicine to get your follicles to grow. They do a trigger shot, or you do a trigger shot to ovulate, but instead of trying naturally, it's insemination. So they get the sperm, they basically use a catheter and inject the sperm into you. If you're going through this journey, or you'll know exactly what I mean. Every step feels huge. Every step feels major and so devastating. Like, I remember we were like ready to start IUI and I had to stop. The first dose of the medicine, it's called letrozole, I didn't react to, so we upped the dose. I reacted too much, and it was just like way too much of a possibility of multiples, so we had to cancel it. That was really devastating. So time goes on. We go in for our first IUI. Check my records here. First official IUI, second attempt. Same thing, medicine, trigger, whatever. Does not work. Then I go in for a second IUI. We do the exact same thing, because we're like, the way my doctor phrases, like, I really think we just need to get the egg and the sperm together. And a very big misconception in the world is that it's easy to get pregnant. Or like, because she told me it's something like, if everything is perfect, you have like a 5 to 10% chance of getting pregnant naturally. like in a given cycle. So it is low. So we're like, okay, let's give it a couple times. And I remember in the back of my head, I just kept saying, oh, at least I don't have to do IVF. IVF is so intense. At least I don't have to do IVF. So I'll speed it up a little bit. I end up doing 2 IUIs. When the second IUI doesn't work, I kind of asked, I said, look, I just want to know what my options are. I want to know if we need to reevaluate. We had kind of agreed, okay, let's do 2 more. So let's do a total of 4 IUIs, then we'll talk about what's next. In the middle of the cycle for the 3rd IUI, I did something called a saline bubble study. Now this, I don't want to like deter anyone from getting this test done, because I do think for some people it's probably really helpful. And I think in my case, it was more painful than the average person. But basically, they do an ultrasound. Basically, they inject a bunch of saline into your uterus and they blow bubbles and they look at the physical structure of your uterus to see if there's any like scar tissue, blockages, anything. This was like probably the second most physically painful thing that I went through in this entire process. And part of it is, again, as I warned, a little bit of a TMI video here. My cervix was kind of weird shaped. It was like difficult to get the catheter in. I don't know. I can't even. Basically, I almost passed out multiple times. And good and bad news for any diagnostic test, right? It's like you don't want anything to be wrong, but you also want an answer. Everything looked perfectly clear. So with that, I was like, okay. Basically, we're like, okay, that looks all clear. And so we kind of, again, reevaluated, like, there's no physical issue. Like, should we be trying 2 more times? Regrouped, decided we're doing 1 more IUI. So a total of 3. After that, we talk about the big, scary next step, IVF. It's so sad to say, and I don't know if everybody's this way, you get so immune to some of these things. Like I've documented my entire journey on other platforms. Like you can literally see beginning to end everything that happened. There's a video of me sitting on the beach finding out for the 4th time I'm not pregnant. And I literally just like, it's kind of like, oh man, like that was it. It's like, yeah, I expected that. Like you get to a point where you just expect a no. Every single time you just expect a no. At this point, we're 1-time intercourse, 3 IUIs deep. Everything is negative. Have not even gotten a sliver of a positive test. So then it's time for IVF. But I feel like this is a detail I probably should have said at the beginning. I don't have PCOS. I don't have endometriosis. I don't have diminished ovarian reserve. Nothing. Like, my entire journey was just unexplained infertility. And throughout this process, basically with every cycle, I told like 1 more person. I was very quiet about it at the beginning. It's just very personal. People have very different views on it or different opinions. Some people want everyone to know what they're going through so they can like not be fragile, but like just be aware and be cognizant of it. I kept thinking it was going to happen. So up until, I'll get to this later on. And again, I apologize, the unmedicated, the ADHD, the pregnancy brain, I know this is kind of all over the place. Basically, we start IVF. If you don't know what IVF is, it is in vitro fertilization. This is what you think of like a petri dish baby. So there's lots of different steps of the IVF process. The first one is the egg retrieval. So this is where you're doing stimulation shots for anywhere between like 9 to 14 days to grow as many eggs and as many follicles as you can. In my case, I got really lucky because I only had to do shots for 9 days, but it's tough. It's really, really tough. And so I was doing shots for 9 days this first cycle of IVF. The kind of breakdown of my egg retrieval numbers was I had 35 retrieved eggs, which is a huge number. I had 13 mature eggs, which is a good number. I had 12 that were fertilized, great. I only had 3 embryos that made it to a blastocyst stage. What blastocyst is, I don't know exactly, but that's when you can freeze your embryo. So for perspective, in like a young female, like we anticipated getting at least 50% of my normally fertilized eggs to freeze. So 6. And we got 3. which was really shocking. They also grade them based on like physical qualities, and they had pretty good gradings. I had really great egg numbers to begin with. That wasn't a concern. I was young, so my eggs I should have had a lot of eggs, should have had good quality eggs, which I did, not a concern. And yet we only ended up with 3 embryos, which was very puzzling. And my doctor had advised us, so there's something called pre-genetic testing that you can do on your embryos. That's when people like find out what the sex is of their embryos, things like that. She had said, look, honestly, people your age, I don't really suggest testing because the odds of it being abnormal are very low. It's more expensive, takes more time, you don't really need to do it. And we're like, yeah, totally right, we don't need to do it. So we didn't get genetic tests on these embryos. We move into an embryo transfer. The first time I did an embryo transfer it's something called a fully medicated cycle. Basically, you don't use your natural cycle at all. They give you estrogen, they give you progesterone, and they manipulate the whole cycle to do a transfer. But you do progesterone and oil shots, which are the shots that if you've ever seen someone doing like shots in their butt, like intramuscular shots. It's this really thick, literally it comes in sesame oil. It's like progesterone and sesame oil. Doing those shots every other day. I'm taking oral estrogen, and then I have to do a vaginal suppository of progesterone 3 times a day for this medicated cycle. And it's negative. I think I didn't really have any pregnancy symptoms, so I was like, you know what, like, yeah, I'm not shocked. Once again, like, not surprised. So then we move into, and this is now when we are approaching a year of trying to get pregnant. We go in to try the next embryo transfer. We had no reason to think a medicated transfer wouldn't work, so we tried another medicated transfer, a medicated cycle. So we start that, and I forgot to mention, as you're doing an embryo transfer, they're constantly measuring your endometrial lining because they need it to be thick enough to receive an embryo. They want it to be at least 7. I go in, and it was looking really good. It was looking like I think like 10 or something. We go in for one more check, and it's significantly gone down, and they see something white in my uterus. I've had 20, 30, 40 ultrasounds at this point. If there was something in there, they would have seen it. So this is new. We have to cancel a transfer. I have to do something called a hysteroscopy. It's similar to that saline study I talked about, except they put you under anesthesia, and they use a scope to look with a camera, and then they also are able to remove anything they find. Shocker, they don't find anything. The next one I personally felt really good about because what we were able to do was a natural transfer. So what a natural transfer is, you purely go off your natural cycle. It looked like I was growing follicles at my own rate. My lining was getting thick. I didn't have to do a trigger shot, nothing like that. Just a natural cycle. We ended up transferring beginning of May. Sorry, we got a girl kicking right here. During this cycle was when I started testing at home. Doctors generally tell you, do not test early. If you are in the fertility community, you know that we all do it. Most of us do it. In this cycle, I had 1 or 2 days of the faintest line ever. Like the only time I've ever seen a line on a test at this point. Then it kind of goes away. I have my call with the doctor to talk about what happened. Oh, I also added in for this round baby aspirin to support blood flow to the uterus. And it's negative again. And I tell her about the faint line, and she was like, you know what? There is a world where it's possible that you had some implantation and it just wasn't ongoing. Essentially a chemical pregnancy. And so it was actually, in my case, helpful that I had tested, because we could kind of keep that in the back of our minds of like, okay, this did happen. We go into the next transfer. And what we decide to do for this transfer is something called a modified natural transfer. We still kind of use my natural cycle like we start it once I start my period, but this time I take shots. I took one called Follistim, and that makes my follicles grow. As the follicles grow, we can then trigger, and then you transfer a week after triggering. This is what our version of the kitchen sink at this point was. I took Claritin, baby aspirin, and again, the progesterone as always. These ones, I was not doing progesterone and oil. I was just doing progesterone suppositories. I also took Pepsid and prednisone. This transfer fails. And that was my third and final embryo. So that was the highest state. To me, the devastating part of that was that I had to do IVF again. As I've said, I expected to not be pregnant. I was like, it's not going to happen, whatever. But now I have to go through this whole process again. So, brings us to June 2023. I do my second round of IVF. I was vegan for the past 5 years throughout this whole process. No doctor ever told me that was an issue. She said it's not going to make a difference. Eat however makes you feel good. I decided and I forgot to mention, in between some of these cycles, I went through such meticulous research of cross-referencing every website that ever tells you to eat anything for fertility. So I had literal spreadsheets of what foods are good for what vitamins and why I should be eating them. So across the board, eggs and salmon were recommended to help with egg quality. So on my own during the egg retrieval process, I was eating eggs and salmon. I also was taking a supplement called CoQ10 that the doctor recommended, which is basically a super intense antioxidant. And then we added in this other shot called Omnitrope, which is for egg quality. And then she did say this time, she said, look, I don't normally recommend this to people your age, but I think you need to test your embryos. And we were going back and forth of because it is expensive. This whole thing is expensive. We got super lucky with our insurance, but it's still really pricey. It has set us back. I asked her, I said, we fully trust you. Whatever you say, we will do. Do you think it's necessary? And she just said, I think you need to test your embryos. So we're doing the genetic embryo testing this time. Our goal is we don't care if we have more eggs or not because I already have a lot of eggs. We want better quality, more mature eggs. So this second round, we retrieve 34 eggs. 19 are mature, which is so much better. 16 of them fertilize. Great. We end up with 3 embryos again. And that was, Matt and I, once we read that and, saw that it was 3, we both just, sat in silence for, 10 minutes. We're like, what in the world? Why is this happening? Also, this round happened to be such a painful recovery. I said that the saline study was one of the 2 most painful parts of this whole process. This recovery was the second one. I did not clinically have ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, but we were worried about it. I was so intensely bloated. There was so much pressure in my abdomen. Super TMI. Super backed up, which happens after an egg retrieval, but also super nauseous. And it was let me just say at one point stuff was coming out both ends because it was there was no room in my body for anything to happen. I couldn't throw up until I went to the bathroom, and I couldn't go to the bathroom until I threw up. It was miserable. I couldn't move, really. I couldn't breathe. So that was and then to find out all of that, and I only got 3 embryos. It was devastating, honestly. It was just so frustrating. I also forgot to mention, this is very important, each IVF cycle I got 3 embryos, right? The first IVF cycle failed, and then 2, what we found out later was 2 chemical pregnancies. So I had implantation in both my 2 later cycles. Second round of IVF. Find out all 3 of our embryos are genetically normal, which was a massive relief. And they were all graded high as they could be graded. I'm like, yes, we know they're normal. In the back of my mind, I'm like, but we don't know the other ones weren't normal because this is what IVF does to you. You question even the good things. So we had the most success with a modified natural transfer. So we now go into our 4th embryo transfer. This one is honestly the hardest to talk about. And I haven't gone into that much detail. I haven't talked about it that much recently, but I just looked at it on my phone and it really got me emotional right away. Trigger warning, there is talk of loss. So this embryo transfer, we did modified natural. We did a bigger kitchen sink this time. So we did vaginal progesterone, aspirin, Claritin, Pepsid, prednisone, Then I took a blood thinner shot daily, and I took progesterone and oil shots every other day. And I'm testing at home, and on day 4, I get a positive pregnancy test. And I was like, no way. Like, what? And I had been testing with my trigger shot, so I knew my trigger shot was gone. It wasn't in my system anymore. I got a positive pregnancy test on day 4. Could not believe it. We then go in for my beta, which is the blood test. The beta is positive, and you want to see it double. So then we go in 2 days later, and, well, when I get the first call from my doctor, the one that says, like, you're pregnant, she calls me and she's like, you're so pregnant. Then we do the second beta. It doubles appropriately. Great, feeling good. I'm feeling a little nauseous, all those things. I'm considered 4 weeks pregnant at that first beta test. Then we scheduled the ultrasound for like 5-ish weeks. 5 to 6 weeks, I think. And in this in between, I had a little bit of spotting. My pregnancy tests were getting less strong, and my symptoms were going down. I'm like, you know what? It ebbs and flows. I've never been pregnant. I don't know how these things work. And we go in for the ultrasound, and I just had this overwhelming feeling before we even left. I was like, I don't feel good about this. And I always say, I went through a year of fertility treatment, IVF, everything, without crying in front of my doctor or even on the phone until this day. What they're looking for at this point is just a small gestational sac. I was on the verge of tears before I walked into that clinic. It's one of those, like, if you know things, and your body tells you what's going on before you know. And I go in and we do the ultrasound, and she's like, okay, there's a small sac, but like it's definitely smaller than what we'd like to see. And again, I'm so thankful for my doctor. She sat and talked with us for like 20 minutes. Like, she was crying. Like, she was like, I want to give you answers. I want to present you with something new. I'm going to talk to other doctors. I'm going to figure out like what we can do. And she's like, and I basically asked her, I said, look, even if, because we decided to test my HCG again, just to see where it was at. And I said, even if the HCG is good, it's probably not good that the sac is this small, right? And she's like, yeah, that's not great. That was my 3rd chemical pregnancy. And I'm very lucky in the sense that the way that my doctor phrased it, which I think is so elegant and the best way you can say it, is my body took care of it on its own. I didn't have to do anything. But that was, it was the hardest thing. It was so incredibly difficult. Matt and I were both like sobbing in this doctor's office. And we just felt like we had finally made it, and it just got like ripped away from us. It was devastating. It was so that's what I alluded to at the beginning. The first pregnancy test and this one were the hardest ones to get through for me. All right, guys, I promise we're almost there. Basically, people just kept asking me, like, how did you keep going? I was like, I think if I ever stopped, I wouldn't be able to go back. So this was the hardest one to get through. We're like, okay, we got 2 more embryos, and my doctor like consulted with some other people, and we're kind of like, okay, we've done the kitchen, like, what do we do? What we changed this time, we did another modified natural cycle, and in the back of my mind, I was like, you know what? I've gotten closer every step of the way. This is not the outcome we wanted, obviously. This is devastating, but every step of the way we've gotten closer. I went from no positive test to a positive test for like a day. Then a positive test for like 2 days. Now I even got a blood test. Like, it was this 5th one. This has to be it. Like, it has to be it. I'm like looking for all the signs. Like, we transferred on September 5th, and it was our 5th embryo. Like, and they would be due in May. 555. It's, it's got to work. So we did prednisone, Pepcid, baby aspirin, Claritin, vaginal suppositories, progesterone and oil daily, Lovenox daily, and then we added in naltrexone, low dose naltrexone. Do all of that. I'm following the meal sheets cookbook by Rachel and Tom Sullivan. Cookbook, but based around like cycle syncing kind of. I am doing castor oil packs like for like at least a week leading up until the transfer. I do the castor oil, put it on like my uterus area, lay in my sauna blanket for like 30-45 minutes. Doing that every day. I was eating super minimally processed food, like even more than normal, like everything you can think of. This was really important to mention, actually. My last 2 transfers, I made the decision to not tell anybody about it. It was very hard for some of our family and friends because like we'd been telling them everything and then we're like, sorry, you don't get to know. For my sanity, I could not keep sharing what was going. We were obviously going to share, but I couldn't keep updating people, so nobody knew about these transfers or when they were happening. So I'm doing all the things for this 5th transfer. We do the transfer, everything looked good. I take my test on day 4, and there's no line, and I remember taking the video and being like, oh, never mind, like, there's no line, and like shutting off the video. And I wasn't upset, I was just like, it's fine, it's early, whatever. And it took until like midway through day 6 to get a strong line. But then I got lines, and then they kept getting stronger and stronger. And then we did my beta. And my beta was significantly lower than the first test, or the first like successful cycle. But it was still positive. And we're like, okay, like not a problem. We get the second beta. It goes up more than double. Great. We get the third beta, and it's less than double. It is an approximate doubling, that's all it needs to be. But it turns out there was a typo in the numbers, and everyone had doubled appropriately. Like, yes. So then because of the last one, we scheduled a very early ultrasound, like 5 weeks. There is a sac. And going into it, I just felt so different. Like, again, this is like your body knows what's happening before your brain does. Like, I don't know if that made sense, but the last one, I knew I had the worst feeling. I had a pit in my stomach. This one, I was excited. I was like, this is it. We go in, there's a sac. There was also a subchorionic hemorrhage. I had a little bit of spotting in between here and there. The really telling one was our 6-week ultrasound, which was going to be our heartbeat. And we go in, and right away, they find the heartbeat. And it's just a wave of relief. And also, like, I just couldn't believe it. I was also still taking pregnancy tests and, like, seeing them getting stronger and getting, like, dye stealers, which is where the test strip is stronger than the control strip, was reassuring. But it was just, like, a weight had been lifted. I was feeling nauseous, which I wasn't happy about, but I was thrilled about at the same time. It was just, like, amazing. And basically, we kept going in for weekly checks, weekly ultrasounds, until 9 weeks, which is when I was discharged from my fertility clinic to go to the big girl OB. That is my very long fertility journey. I'm gonna stop the story there because everything else is just pregnancy. Spoiler alert, it all works out. I'm 8 months pregnant, just waiting for this girl to get here. When I talk about it, or when I look back on it, like, I see videos, and I am like, how did I do that? How did I do it? Like, I don't know how I did it. Like, I can do a whole separate video of, like, Q&As relating to this, because there's a bunch of nuanced things of, like, how you have to live your life, what things you can't do, and I just, like, feel like this was just the time to tell you what happened, not share every one of those details, because this would be, like, an hour-long video. I already don't know how long it's gonna be, but it's gonna be long. I'm so grateful for my clinic. I'm so grateful for Matt. He is the best husband in the world and was so supportive and so helpful. I am so grateful for this little baby we have now, and I can't wait to meet her. If you are going through this, I am thinking about you, and I'm sending you the best vibes, and it is the hardest thing I've ever gone through. Absolutely the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And now I'm just sitting here and, like, having my daughter wiggle around in my belly, like, trying to bust out through my stomach. I keep trying to tell her that's not her exit. She has to go a different way. It's still surreal. Like, every day I'm like, can you believe this? Like, can you believe that I have a baby in my uterus? If you watch this whole thing, thank you for listening to my story. I have gotten so many messages from people that, like, sharing my story has helped, so I figure, why not put it out there all together in one shot instead of in little bits? And yeah, if you have any questions about infertility or literally anything I mentioned, please comment them. I'm happy to do another video that's a Q&A version of this and like answering those specific questions. Yeah, I don't really know how to end this because that was just like so much to talk about. But thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I hope if you're going through this, it gets better and you get to your rainbow or your baby soon, especially because it's a different type of video and I'm still just feeling out what you guys like. Let me know if you liked this style. So if you did like it, comment, subscribe, like it, all the things. And I will see you guys in the next video, probably a vlog.